Okay, boys, so a while ago I made this really shitty, low quality, low effort video that claimed to be a tutorial, and it ended up being this useless video where I just played the stems from the song and called it a tutorial. Yeah, this one here, like the most useless video ever, but you guys liked it anyway for some reason. But now I'm actually going to go into complete depth and like kind of a step-by-step of how I make these beats. You guys already heard what it sounds like, so
let's get straight to it.
So BPM is number one. You either want to go to 200 or 190. 200 is kind of like the signature Detroit sound, but 190 is going to give you that similar effect, but still create space for perks and hats and stuff like that. Then step two is to get rid of the limiter. The limiter is garbage if you have no idea how to use it, and most people don't. Take the limiter off and throw on a soft clipper at the end of your master. To some of you, this is obvious as hell, but like, listen to how bad the limiter actually ducks out your kicks. Every time the kick hits, it kind of removes all the knock and ducks everything out, whereas the soft clipper keeps that knock but doesn't let it distort through the master. Yeah. The next is finding your main melody. This is probably going to play throughout the entire beat. You're probably going to go with a piano because like every Detroit beat has piano, but please don't use FL keys. There's so many better pianos inside FL Studio without even having extra plugins. Like even the Citrus Grand piano is better than FL keys. At least it has some sort of like unique sound to it. For most of my beats, I use this direct wave piano preset. I'll probably put it in the description if I remember. I feel like nobody uses direct wave, honestly, but like the piano is pretty fire. As far as the actual melody, you're probably going to want to write it in minor. I think this one's written in E major, I'm pretty sure, but like minor is going to be way easier to get the Detroit sound out of. So let's hear this real quick. If you really want the Detroit sound, you're going to want to have these jumps where you go from low to high, low to high. And once you get a 2-bar melody down, I suggest copy paste, and then on the last bar, you're going to want to do some sort of variation. Getting a good melody is pretty much the hardest part of a Detroit beat. Once you get that, all the other things kind of fall into place. Anyway, so now we have a piano melody, right? So now you have a choice to make. You can either have these low piano keys, or you can use the signature like Detroit bass. You can use both, but you have to be really careful, make sure everything's in key. As you can see, these pretty much follow the exact same melody. I made a whole video about the Detroit bass pluck thing, and I put my preset in that video, so check that out. I'll probably have it on the screen somewhere. Once you actually have the bass pluck, you can kind of make a variation of it using these two knobs here. I wouldn't recommend going very far out of this range here, because once you go too high, you get this weird, like, bad noise. The amount knob picks the starting point of the filter, so the higher you go, the higher bass you're going to have, as opposed to being down here. And then the decay decides how fast it kind of closes the filter. So when it's all the way up, you have this one consistent bass noise, but if you put it to like around here, you get that signature bass noise. You don't want to use the same decay and amount in every beat, because then it kind of sounds like you're using the same preset, which you are, but at least change it, you know? So to write your actual pattern for either the bass piano or the bass pluck, all you're going to do is go to your piano melody that you wrote earlier, and then make sure ghost notes are enabled in helpers ghost channels, right? Yeah, okay. Make sure that's enabled, and then start with all your root notes. So G sharp on every bar here, and drop it like 2 octaves. Here, let me mute the regular piano. Bam, okay. So your goal is to get the notes to be in 2nd octave or sometimes 3rd octave, depending what note you're on, but you're going to want this sound. Like that deep, low-end piano noise. And then from here, I recommend just going in thirds like this. I mean, that's pretty standard for a Detroit beat. If you understand how keys work and how chords work, you don't have to start on the root note like I started on C sharp, but the root notes are going to be the easiest to start on. And eventually you'll find a bass melody that's in key with the main melody. You absolutely have to make sure that all your bass notes are being played in that same bar somewhere in the melody. So C sharp is down here, C sharp is right here, played 4 times. G sharp is here, G sharp is played there. And then A is played right here and here. And the melodies can be interchanged between the piano and the bass pluck. They're basically the same. And then the easy part is drums. Your kicks are generally going to follow the same pattern in every Detroit beat, but you can kind of add some sauce and just change shit up. That kick pattern, the bum, 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 is pretty much standard in Detroit beats. And after that, you can kind of like play around with it, see what sounds good. And here at the end, you can see I put a kick roll. I mean, it's completely optional, and I changed it up a little bit here. But for the most part, you're going to follow this pattern here. Like that is your starting point. Then your 808s are going to follow the beat of the kicks, but they're going to follow also the melody of your bass notes. And for the selection of drums, I have a specific Detroit drum kit. I forgot where I got it, but I'm going to be dropping my own drum kit soon. It's going to have all sorts of Detroit sounds and stuff in it. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to see if I can link the Detroit drum kit I have right now so you guys can use it. It has some instruments and kind of the signature noises in here too. Also, highly recommend Mai's drum kits. They're really, really good, especially the kicks. The kicks slap. That's the one I have here. I have, I think... yeah, this one. This kick slaps. Go get his drum kit. I'm going to link that too. That shit's fire. So again, you have a choice to make. So you can either use this as your starting point, or you can space out your hats. As a rule of thumb, if I'm using 200 BPM, I'm going to be using this one. And obviously with some variation, you're going to want to put like some doubles, just as your sprinkler hi-hat. But if you're doing 190, I recommend the spaced out ones like I've used in this beat. The ones I used here are these. But I mean, either way, it's up to preference. Like these hi-hats are also gonna work here as well. If I just replace them. Oh shit, I should have made that longer. I just made this kind of weird hi-hat pattern because I always use that and it was getting kind of old, so I decided to do this now. And then comes the snare, which isn't really as obvious as you'd think. If you listen to a lot of GRIZZLEY songs, there's 2 different snares and claps. I'll play some examples, even though I'll probably get copyright strikes, but there's these points where you have just a clap. It's usually a softer clap. And then when the actual beat is playing, there's usually a snare, a hard snare layered on top of it. I'll play those examples now. So in the same song, they have 2 different like clap patterns, one with a basic clap, one with a snare on top of it. And a good example would be like here, right? Like let's say I had the clap running here. Like the beat hasn't dropped yet, so you're using these softer claps. But then when the beat does drop, you kind of have those harder snares to add more of a punch to your beat. And then finally, perks and open hats. Generally stay away from these like SoundCloud perks, like the, where is it? These, I mean, they're cool, but they're not really for Detroit beats. These perks, these short ones, are the best ones. These are the ones you always hear, specifically this one. So for the actual perks, it's pretty straightforward. You treat them like you would in any other beat. You put them like on the off beats. I'll put the claps in for reference. There's a few places you can put them, but that's kind of the most common. And one thing that's not in this beat but is also relevant is this noise. You hear this noise a lot when Ant produces a track. He kind of has them in like rolls like this. I'll play an example of it since I'm already getting a copyright strike.
Watch your motherfucking mouth, nigga.
But that can also be used as a perk. And then the last part, probably the easiest part, is layout. You start off with the piano, the bass piano, and your main melody, and put a crash right in the beginning. If you have a strong enough piano melody, you can tell right away that the beat's gonna slap. And then once that plays for a couple bars, you introduce the bass pluck if you're using it, and then usually one percussion instrument, and you're gonna use transition. So for this transition, all I did was reverse the crash and then put the same exact crash facing the right direction right after it. Pretty easy. So here, all I did was introduce the perk, but you can also put a clap. I mean, it really doesn't matter. And that sounds like this. At this point, you've already built some energy from the piano because that shit smacks. And then once you introduce the bass pluck, it is now a Detroit beat. And after about 16 bars is a good place to put everything together. But you have to note, when you're playing 808s, don't play the bass pluck because it just tends to clash. Even if it's in key, it just never works out. Like, listen to this shit. So you're gonna put everything together except the bass pluck. You can leave the piano, oh fuck. You can leave the piano bass, but sometimes it sounds better without it. But in this case, I have the 808s in the same exact pattern as the piano. So it tends to work a little better when you do that. And then for some like extra sauce and a little more schmack, I just kind of took the drums out and then made it like a fake beat drop, but then actually slapped it 10 times harder with this reverse 808. This effect is pretty easy. You just drag in the 808, click reverse, and you end up with this crazy effect. That shit schmacks. But I mean, this is all optional. You could just start the beat normally. It really doesn't matter, but you're gonna want to use this transition again. Use this transition every time you change something dramatically. It just kind of blends things together, and specifically this crash, you hear in like basically every GRIZZLEY song. Play the beat out a couple times, then you're just gonna go back to this. And make sure you put some variation, like here, I'm gonna put the beat without the 808s and the hi-hats, just to kind of change things up so you get this. Oh wait, I put the crashes. Make sure you put the crashes also. Here we go. You just get that smooth transition. It's just nice. And that's pretty much it. Just stretch it out to 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. If you make beats, you already know how to do that. Just copy paste, you know. I hope y'all learned something from this shit, because like there's not really that many good Detroit beat tutorials, and there's really only a couple producers I can name of on YouTube that are like schmacking this shit. Now I have to edit out all my stuttering. This was a... Peace, boys.